The air in Courtroom 4 of the Port Sterling District Courthouse crackled with a tension thick enough to taste. Sunlight streamed through the tall, arched windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the heavy silence, but offered no warmth. Every seat in the public gallery was filled, eyes fixed forward, a collective gaze pinning Clara Hayes where she stood. Her hands, slick with nervous sweat, gripped the handles of her younger brother Ethan's wheelchair. 25 years old, Clara looked pale and fragile, her shoulders slumped under the weight of unseen burdens. Beside her, Ethan sat poised, still. At 19, his face held a maturity that belied his years, his eyes sharp and assessing as they scanned the imposing courtroom. Only the slight, almost imperceptible tightening of his grip on the wheelchair's armrests betrayed any unease. This wasn't just a legal proceeding, it was a fight for survival. Tech giant OmniCorp, a behemoth casting a long shadow over Port Sterling skyline, was suing Clara for $5 million, a sum that represented the entire value of the modest family home their parents had left them, their only inheritance, their only anchor in a world already rocked by tragedy. Adding to their desperation, their lawyer, David Chun, was unexpectedly absent. A terse message received just hours earlier spoke of a sudden, serious traffic accident. Suspiciously convenient, Ethan thought, his jaw tightening. Presiding over the proceedings was Judge Marcus Harding, a man whose reputation for sternness was matched only by the impatience currently radiating from the bench. His gaze swept over Clara and Ethan, lingering for a moment on the wheelchair with ill-disguised annoyance. Across the aisle, OmniCorp's legal team exuded confidence. Leading them was Evelyn Reed, a formidable figure in a tailored suit, her expression sharp, predatory. A faint, knowing smirk played on her lips as she arranged her files, the picture of corporate power ready to crush its opposition. Clara fumbled with her phone again, hoping against hope for news from Chun. Nothing. Her breath hitched, a quiet sob escaping before she could stifle it.
How can this happen? It's everything from the house. Mom and Dad's.
Ethan reached over, placing his hand gently over hers. His touch was steady, grounding.
It's okay, Clara. Breathe. Just breathe. We knew this was coming.
Judge Harding's gavel struck the bench with a sharp crack, silencing the low murmur that had begun to fill the room.
Let's proceed. Case 743B, OmniCorp versus Hayes. Miss Hayes, where is your counsel? This is the third time we've convened for this matter. There will be no further delays.
Clara's voice was barely a whisper, strained with unshed tears.
Your Honor, Mr. Chun, he was in an accident. This morning. He can't be here. Please, we need.
An accident? How terribly inconvenient. The court notes Mr. Chen's absence. Given the repeated delays, we will proceed today regardless. Do you have alternative representation, Ms. Hayes?
Clara shook her head mutely, tears finally spilling, tracing paths down her pale cheeks. The weight of hopelessness seemed to physically press down on her. It was in that moment, seeing his sister's despair, that Ethan moved. The soft whir of his wheelchair's electric motor was unnervingly loud in the strained silence as he maneuvered forward, positioning himself directly before the bench. He looked up at Judge Harding, his gaze level and unwavering.
Your Honor, I will represent my sister.
A stunned silence descended upon the courtroom, holding for a beat before shattering into ripples of incredulous laughter. Snickers echoed from the gallery. Even Evelyn Reed allowed herself a wider, more condescending smile. Judge Harding leaned back in his high-backed chair, making no attempt to hide his derisive amusement. He chuckled, a dry, grating sound.
You'll represent her? A boy, hardly out of school, playing lawyer? What could you possibly know about the complexities of contract law and corporate litigation, Mr. Hayes?
Ethan's face flushed slightly under the wave of mockery, but his voice, when he spoke, was surprisingly calm, cutting through the lingering laughter with the precision of a blade.
My legs may not work, Your Honor, but my mind is perfectly fine. I am currently enrolled in pre-law at Sterling University, and I am intimately familiar with the details of this case. I am prepared to proceed.
Evelyn Reed whispered something to her associate, who smirked back.
This should be entertaining. A sideshow.
Clara grabbed Ethan's shoulder, her fingers digging in urgently.
Ethan, no. This is insane. You can't. It's too dangerous.
But Ethan gently removed her hand. Judge Harding leaned forward again, his eyes glittering with a mixture of contempt and cruel curiosity.
Fine. For amusement's sake, Mr. Hayes. The court grants you permission to represent your sister pro se. But understand this, I expect adherence to procedure. One misstep, one display of ignorance, and this performance is over. Let's see if this young prodigy truly has any substance, or if it's merely misplaced bravado born of desperation.
The gavel fell, sealing Ethan's audacious claim. But facing the might of OmniCorp and a hostile court, could this young man, underestimated by everyone, truly stand a chance? The first test was about to begin. Echoes of the past, sparks of brilliance. The courtroom held its breath. Judge Harding, a cruel glint in his eye, leaned forward, clearly intending to expose the young man's ignorance with a swift, public humiliation. The first question came, deceptively simple, aimed less at legal knowledge and more at intimidation.
Very well, Mr. Hayes. Let's start with something fundamental. Explain the principle of stare decisis and its relevance in this jurisdiction. A simple concept, surely, for a Sterling University pre-law hopeful.
A low chuckle rippled through the OmniCorp legal team's side of the room. Clara closed her eyes briefly, a silent prayer escaping her lips. But Ethan didn't hesitate. His voice was clear, steady, each word precise.
Stare decisis, Your Honor, Latin for, to stand by things decided, is the legal principle by which courts are obligated to follow precedents established by prior decisions. Within this jurisdiction, the Port Sterling District Court is bound by rulings from the state Supreme Court and federal appellate courts within our circuit, ensuring consistency and predictability in the application of law. It prevents arbitrary rulings and provides a foundation for legal argument.
The murmuring in the courtroom died down. Judge Harding's smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of surprise, quickly masked by irritation.
Reciting definitions, impressive. Now, tell me about the statute of frauds as it pertains to contracts potentially exceeding 1 year. Does it apply universally?
The statute of frauds requires certain types of contracts to be in writing to be legally enforceable, Your Honor. This includes contracts that, by their terms, cannot be performed within 1 year from the date of their making. However, there are exceptions, such as partial performance or promissory estoppel, where reliance on an oral agreement might make it enforceable despite the statute. The applicability depends heavily on the specific facts and the nature of the reliance or performance.
A wave of genuine surprise washed over the gallery. Whispers turned from mockery to intrigue. Evelyn Reed, OmniCorp's lead counsel, leaned forward slightly, her sharp gaze fixed on Ethan, no longer amused but analytical, assessing. Judge Harding shifted uncomfortably in his seat.
Just memorize passages, anyone can do that. Let's try something with relevance. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution outlined the Commerce Clause in one significant Supreme Court case interpreting its scope.
Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3, Your Honor, the Commerce Clause, grants Congress the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations, among the several states, and with the Indian tribes. 1. Its scope has been broadly interpreted. A significant case is Wickard v. Filburn, 1942, where the court held that even purely local activity, like a farmer growing wheat for personal consumption, could be regulated under the Commerce Clause if, in aggregate, it substantially affects interstate commerce. This established a wide reach for federal regulatory power.
The judge's face hardened. The condescending smile was gone completely, replaced by a stony mask. Ethan met his gaze, unflinching. But behind the steel in Ethan's eyes, deeper memories stirred, echoes of the day his world shattered. His mind flashed back, unbidden, to 3 years earlier. A relentless downpour lashed against the windshield. Inside the car, laughter. His father's hand resting on his mother's in the front seat. Clara, then 22, was driving them home after a rare family weekend getaway. Ethan, 16, was in the back, engrossed in a book. Ironically, an introduction to constitutional law he'd just bought. Then, chaos. The screech of tires on wet asphalt, the blinding headlights of a large truck. An OmniCorp delivery truck, he'd later learn, though the details seemed insignificant then compared to the horror, jackknifing across the highway. The world spun in slow motion. The sickening crunch of metal, the explosion of glass like sharp, sudden rain. His parents' final, terrified cries, then darkness. He awoke in a sterile hospital room, the silence broken only by the rhythmic beeping of machines and the phantom ache in limbs that no longer responded. The news was delivered with clinical detachment. His parents, killed instantly. He himself would likely never walk again. Only Clara had escaped with relatively minor physical injuries, though the emotional scars ran deep, etched with guilt. Those endless nights staring at the water-stained ceiling tiles, phantom pain, a cruel mockery of the legs he could no longer feel. It was then Ethan Hayes made a vow. His body might be broken, but his mind would become a weapon, sharp and resilient. While his friends visited, offering awkward sympathy or suggesting video games as a distraction, Ethan devoured law books. Torts, contracts, civil procedure, constitutional law. He absorbed them all, pages illuminated by the dim glow of a flashlight long after the hospital lights were out. Knowledge became his armor, his refuge. Clara, abandoning her promising postgraduate studies in graphic design, became his caregiver, her eyes always shadowed with a guilt he couldn't alleviate. It was my fault, she'd whisper late at night, when she thought he was asleep. I was driving. The insurance payout barely covered the initial onslaught of medical bills. Clara took freelance design work, barely keeping them afloat, the weight of responsibility aging her prematurely. Every morning, Ethan saw new lines of worry etched on her face. And every morning, he woke with more legal knowledge than the day before, fueled by grief, rage, and a burning need for something. Justice? Revenge? Understanding? Maybe all three. Back in the courtroom, the silence stretched. Judge Harding stared at Ethan, the young man who refused to fit the dismissive narrative he'd constructed. Finally, the judge gave a stiff, reluctant nod.
Very well, Mr. Hayes. You seem to have prepared. You may proceed with representing your sister. But be warned, I will tolerate no further theatrics or delays. Make your opening statement.
Evelyn Reed watched Ethan, a flicker of grudging respect warring with calculation in her eyes. She leaned over to her colleague again.
Maybe not such a joke after all. This might actually be interesting. Keep an eye on him.
Ethan took a deep breath, the faces in the courtroom blurring slightly as he gathered his thoughts. Clara gave his shoulder a squeeze, a silent message of encouragement passing between them.
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the court.
Ethan had won the first skirmish, silencing the laughter with cold, hard knowledge. But the real battle hadn't even begun. Evelyn Reed and OmniCorp were just warming up, and the shadows of the past still lingered heavily. 1. Books.google.com. Books.google.com. The poison contract. But how had Clara and Ethan Hayes found themselves in this impossible position, facing the wrath of a corporate titan with only a 19-year-old law student standing between them and ruin? How did a promising young software developer become the target of a multi-million-dollar lawsuit? To understand the roots of this legal battle, we need to rewind just a few months to a meeting held high above the bustling streets of Port Sterling, in the sterile, imposing heart of the OmniCorp Tower. Clara Hayes sat nervously in a minimalist conference room, the panoramic view of the city skyline doing little to ease the tremor in her hands. Across the vast, polished table sat Maxwell Thorne, the charismatic and utterly ruthless CEO of OmniCorp. Flanking him, observing silently with eyes that missed nothing, was Evelyn Reed, the corporation's notoriously sharp chief counsel. Thorne leaned back, steepling his fingers, a practiced smile playing on his lips.
Ms. Hayes. Clara. Your presentation at the Tech Innovators Expo was truly remarkable. Your predictive imaging algorithm, groundbreaking. OmniCorp prides itself on identifying and nurturing disruptive talent. We see immense potential here.
Clara felt a surge of adrenaline, a dizzying mix of validation and hope. Years she'd spent developing that algorithm in the small apartment she shared with Ethan, fueled by coffee and a belief in its potential for medical diagnostics. To have Maxwell Thorne himself acknowledge it.
Thank you, Mr. Thorne. I believe it has significant applications, potentially life-saving.
Precisely. We agree. Which is why OmniCorp is prepared to offer you a unique opportunity. A pilot project. We want to integrate your core logic into our advanced analytics platform, Project Chimera. Of course, substantial resources will be allocated. This is the contract.
He slid a thick document binder across the table. Clara hesitated, reaching for it with slightly trembling fingers. The air conditioning seemed to hum louder, amplifying the pressure in the room.
Take your time, naturally. But opportunity knocks but once, Clara. We have other exceptionally talented developers eager for this project. At OmniCorp, we value decisiveness. Trust is key in our business. This contract outlines a very generous initial development fee and significant performance bonuses. Enough, I imagine, to solve certain financial pressures? Sign today, and you can start interfacing with our team tomorrow.
The implication hung in the air. He knew about their precarious finances, their parents' medical debts, the mortgage. That night, Clara returned to their cramped apartment, her face flushed with an excitement Ethan hadn't seen since before the accident.
Ethan, you won't believe this. OmniCorp, Maxwell Thorne himself. He loved the algorithm. They offered me a contract, a pilot project. Look.
She thrust the binder into his hands. Ethan, ever cautious, began reading immediately, his brow furrowing as he navigated the dense legalese.
This could change everything. The initial fee alone. It could pay off nearly half our debts. We could finally breathe. Maybe even look into better physical therapy options for you.
Clara, wait a minute. Have you read this thoroughly? Section 7b, Duty of Undivided Loyalty. Section 12, Reporting Protocols and Proprietary Interpretations.
What? What about them? It's standard corporate stuff, isn't it?
Standard? Clara, this language. All findings, improvements, or related concepts, however tangential, become sole property of OmniCorp. Duty to report issues only through designated channels determined solely by OmniCorp. Failure to adhere to OmniCorp's interpretation of appropriate conduct constitutes material breach. It's dangerously vague. They can twist this any way they want. What if you find a flaw? What if they misuse the tech? According to this, raising concerns outside their exact protocol could put you in breach. This undivided loyalty clause, it's a leash, not a partnership.
Ethan, don't be paranoid. It's OmniCorp. They're a global leader. Why would they try to trap a small freelance developer like me? This is our chance. We need this. Please don't ruin this.
Overwhelmed by hope and financial desperation, Clara signed the next day. Weeks turned into intense work, integrating her code. But then, unease crept in. Through coded internal project files she inadvertently accessed, Clara discovered OmniCorp wasn't using her algorithm for medical imaging at all. They were adapting its predictive capabilities for Project Chimera, a sophisticated, ethically dubious mass surveillance system, capable of analyzing population behavior with terrifying accuracy. Horrified, realizing the potential for catastrophic misuse, Clara knew she couldn't stay silent. Following what she believed were reasonable ethical protocols, she compiled a detailed report outlining the dangerous application and potential violations of data privacy principles, sending it directly to OmniCorp's internal ethics board and her project lead. The response was swift, brutal, and electronic. An email from Evelyn Reed's office landed in her inbox the next morning. It cited Section 12, reporting outside the designated channels determined by OmniCorp, and Section 7b, claiming her ethical concerns constituted a breach of undivided loyalty. OmniCorp terminated the contract and demanded $5 million in damages for breach and alleged misuse of preparatory information. Clara stared at the screen, the color draining from her face, the room spinning.
5 million? How? I tried to do the right thing.
Ethan wheeled himself over, taking in the legal threats on the screen, his expression growing darker with each line. His earlier warnings echoed grimly in the small apartment.
I told you. The vague clauses, the loyalty oath. It wasn't standard, Clara. It was a setup. A poison contract designed to trap you from the very beginning.
And so the trap was sprung. The contract, once a symbol of hope, became the weapon threatening to destroy them. Back in the present, facing Evelyn Reed's icy stare across the courtroom, Ethan knew disproving the contract's flimsy premise was only the beginning. Digital deception and desperate measures. The weight of that poison contract settled heavily back onto Clara and Ethan Hayes as the trial resumed the next morning. The brief respite granted by Ethan's competent display the day before evaporated under the cold reality of OmniCorp's power. As Clara pushed Ethan towards the courthouse entrance, one of Evelyn Reed's junior associates, carrying an overflowing briefcase, stepped directly into the path of the wheelchair ramp, pausing to adjust his tie. He offered a saccharine smile as Ethan was forced to stop abruptly. Junior lawyer. Oh, terribly sorry. Didn't see you there. Clumsy of me. He slowly moved aside, the gesture feeling deliberate, a small assertion of dominance. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, maneuvering past the obstruction, his face an impassive mask. Inside, the air was thick with anticipation. Evelyn Reed stood ready, a predator sensing weakness.
Proceed, Ms. Reed. OmniCorp's case.
Thank you, Your Honor. We now present evidence that directly contradicts the defendant's claims of ethical reporting and demonstrates a clear pattern of disloyalty and breach. I submit these emails, obtained from OmniCorp servers, marked Exhibit B.
Reed placed a thick stack of printed emails before the clerk. Copies were distributed. She addressed the court, her voice smooth as venom.
These emails, Your Honor, sent from Ms. Hayes' company-assigned account, unequivocally show her transmitting proprietary algorithm details, sensitive Project Chimera specifications, and confidential internal assessments directly to a known competitor, Cybernetic Solutions, just days before she supposedly discovered these so-called ethical concerns. A clear case of industrial espionage followed by a manufactured excuse.
Clara gasped, her face paling further.
That's a lie. I never sent those. I wouldn't. Those must be their fake.
Order, Ms. Hayes. Your counsel may address the evidence. Mr. Hayes?
Ethan picked up the sheaf of emails, his eyes scanning them rapidly, then slowing, focusing intently. He ignored the smug look on Reed's face, the impatient tapping of Judge Harding's fingers.
Your Honor, I request a brief recess to examine these documents thoroughly.
Examining emails, Mr. Hayes? They seem perfectly clear. Are we delaying again?
Standard procedure, Your Honor, requires careful review of presented evidence. Especially evidence as critical as this.
Harding sighed dramatically, but nodded. After 15 minutes, court resumed. Ethan held up the first email printout.
Your Honor, Ms. Reed, while these emails appear damaging, a closer look reveals anomalies. Specifically, in the email headers. May I approach?
Scoffing email headers? What is this, amateur hour? Your Honor, this is absurd. The content is clear.
The headers contain routing information, timestamps, server authentication codes, Ms. Reed. Details crucial for verifying authenticity. For instance, this email, allegedly sent at 2:15 p.m. on March 12th, the server code here corresponds to an OmniCorp server that was down for maintenance that entire afternoon. Furthermore, the DKIM signature, the digital verification, fails validation across multiple emails in this stack. And the timestamp format on several headers doesn't align with standard SMTP protocols used by OmniCorp's known mail exchange servers at that time. These aren't just typos, they suggest digital manipulation. Tampering.
A buzz filled the courtroom. Evelyn Reed's confident expression wavered for the first time, a flicker of annoyance crossing her features. Judge Harding looked momentarily flustered, glancing towards Reed before regaining his composure.
Therefore, Your Honor, I formally request a full digital forensic analysis of the original server logs pertaining to these specific emails to determine their authenticity.
Objection. This is a phishing expedition. A desperate attempt to muddy the waters with technical jargon. The emails speak for themselves.
With respect, Your Honor, verifying the authenticity of digital evidence isn't jargon, it's fundamental due process. Is there any reason OmniCorp or this court would wish to avoid such a simple, standard verification if the emails are, as Ms. Reed claims, genuine?
Silence descended. Harding rubbed his chin, his gaze shifting, avoiding Ethan's direct stare. The air was thick with unspoken questions. Finally, he cleared his throat.
Very well. Reluctantly, the court orders OmniCorp to provide the relevant server logs for independent forensic examination. We will revisit this exhibit upon receipt of the expert's report. Proceed with your next point, Ms. Reed.
Clara gripped Ethan's shoulder, a tiny spark of hope rekindled in her eyes. They had won a skirmish, a crucial one. But as they left the courthouse later, the cold, watchful eyes of Evelyn Reed's team followed them, a silent promise that this was far from over. That evening, seeking refuge in cheap comfort food, they sat in a worn booth at a noisy downtown diner, the smell of fries and coffee filling the air.
I saw her face, Ethan. Reed looked furious when Harding ordered the forensics. Maybe this is the turning point?
It's a small win, Clara. Don't get complacent. They wouldn't have planted fake emails unless they had more to hide. They'll come back harder.
Just as Ethan spoke, a figure slid hesitantly into the booth opposite them. A young man, maybe early 30s, wearing a suit that looked slept in, his tie askew, beads of sweat on his forehead despite the diner's cool air. He glanced around nervously, his eyes wide with fear. Daniel Cho, Mr. Hayes? Ms. Hayes? Sorry to intrude. Can I talk to you for a moment? Please? Ethan and Clara exchanged wary glances.
Who are you? Daniel Cho, lowering his voice, Daniel Cho. I used to work at OmniCorp. Project Chimera. I saw your sister's name on the initial reports, before.
Are you following us? What do you want? Daniel Cho, please just listen. I'm taking a huge risk being here. They're faking everything. Not just the emails. Dates on documents, internal memos, review signatures. It's all being altered. They planned this lawsuit weeks before you even sent that ethics report, Clara.
How do you know this? Do you have proof?
Daniel Cho glanced nervously towards the diner's entrance again, then reached into his inside jacket pocket, pulling out a small, nondescript USB flash drive. He pushed it quickly across the table towards Ethan. Daniel Cho, this is everything I could copy before they locked me out. Original drafts, internal finance requests mentioning the penalty clause before the alleged breach, timestamped logs. It proves they set you up. My mom, she's really sick. I need the job reference they promised if I kept quiet. But what they're doing, it's wrong. Especially after. Well, they targeted you specifically, Clara. Please use this. But be careful. They're dangerous. The small USB drive felt heavy in Ethan's hand, a digital key that could unlock the truth or unleash further danger. Daniel Cho's fearful eyes told them this conspiracy ran deeper and darker than they imagined. Could they trust him? And could they use this evidence without getting him killed? Escalating threats and forged trust. That night, the small apartment glowed only by the light of Ethan's laptop screen. The USB drive Daniel Cho had risked everything for contained a bombshell, irrefutable proof of OmniCorp's premeditated trap. Internal memos dated weeks before Clara even reported her concerns discussed the need to neutralize Hayes' potential IP claims and outlined the exact penalty clauses inserted into her contract. Drafts showed the evolution of the predatory language Ethan had spotted.
Look at this, Clara. An email from Reed to Thorne, 2 weeks before you signed. Subject, Hayes contingency. It details the plan to bury your algorithm in Project Chimera and use the loyalty clause as grounds for termination if you raised any objections. They never intended to let you succeed.
Voice trembling, they planned it all. Just like you said. It wasn't just business, it was malicious. How can people be like this? For money?
Power, Clara. Money is just how they keep score. But this changes things. This proves malice aforethought. It's not just breach of contract anymore.
A spark of fierce excitement lit Ethan's eyes, momentarily overshadowing the ever-present exhaustion. but fear coiled beneath it. Daniel Cho had risked his career, possibly his safety, for this. They had to use it wisely. Weeks later, the digital forensics report on the emails Reed had submitted was delivered to the court. The tension was palpable as Judge Harding called the court to order, his gaze flicking nervously towards the forensic expert waiting to testify. Forensic expert. Your Honor, our analysis confirms significant anomalies in the email evidence submitted by OmniCorp, marked Exhibit B. Multiple email headers show evidence of direct manipulation, specifically in the routing data and server authentication codes. Timestamps on several key emails do not align with the corresponding server logs provided by OmniCorp. Furthermore, DKM signatures, designed to verify sender authenticity, failed validation tests on emails critical to OmniCorp's claim of prior breach by Ms. Hayes. In short, the emails show conclusive signs of digital tampering. A wave of murmurs swept the courtroom. Reporters scribbled furiously. Clara let out a shaky breath, gripping Ethan's arm. Ethan felt a surge of triumph, hard-won and precarious. Judge Harding's face flushed crimson, his knuckles white where he gripped his gavel.
Order! Order in the court. The court acknowledges the expert's report. Ms. Reed, does OmniCorp have any further evidence to present at this time? Or shall we move to dismiss based on this fabrication?
Evelyn Reed stood, unflustered, her composure absolute. The forensic report seemed to slide off her like water off polished steel.
Your Honor, while the technical details regarding the emails are regrettable and will be addressed internally at OmniCorp, they do not negate the core issue. We have further evidence. A sworn affidavit from Mr. Ben Carter, Ms. Hayes' former colleague on Project Chimera.
She produced another document. Clara stared, bewildered.
Ben. What? Ben wouldn't.
Mr. Carter's statement, notarized just yesterday, confirms under oath that Ms. Hayes discussed her intentions to leak proprietary information with him on multiple occasions prior to her supposed ethical reporting. He confirms she expressed dissatisfaction with her contract and sought leverage.
No, that's impossible. Ben is my friend. He would never say that.
Your Honor, may I examine the affidavit?
Ethan took the document, his eyes immediately drawn to the signature at the bottom. He remembered Ben, remembered seeing his signature on birthday cards Clara kept, on project sign-off sheets. This was close. Too close. Yet.
Your Honor, with all due respect to the notarization, this signature does not appear to be Mr. Carter's genuine signature. The pressure is inconsistent, the loop on the capital C is distinctly different from his usual formation, and the final downstroke on the R is uncharacteristically sharp. I believe this signature is a forgery.
Laughing lightly, forgery? Based on armchair graphology, Mr. Hayes? Your Honor, this is becoming farcical. The document is legally attested.
The court accepts the affidavit as presented, Mr. Hayes. Your objections are noted and dismissed. Move on, Ms. Reed.
Later that day, as Ethan and Clara were leaving the courthouse, disheartened despite the email victory, Clara's phone buzzed. It was another former colleague. Ben Carter had been struck by a car in a hit-and-run accident just hours after signing that affidavit. He was in intensive care at Port Sterling General. They rushed to the hospital. Ben lay pale and bruised in the bed, a cast on his leg, his face etched with pain and fear.
Whispering hoarsely, Clara. Ethan. I'm so sorry. They came to my house. Showed me pictures of my kids. Knew their school routes. Said if I didn't sign the statement Reed's office prepared, something terrible might happen to them. An accident, like mine. I had to. I'm sorry.
Oh Ben, it's not your fault. It's them. OmniCorp.
Be careful. Please. They're ruthless. They'll stop at nothing.
Leaving the hospital, shaken, the threats felt terrifyingly real. As Clara pushed Ethan towards the subway entrance, navigating the evening crowd, someone jostled him hard from behind. His wheelchair lurched violently towards the steep concrete stairs. Only Ethan's instinctive grab on the wheels, his knuckles scraping against the metal, stopped him from tumbling down. He looked back sharply, catching a glimpse of a man in a dark suit melting quickly into the crowd, a fleeting expression of cold satisfaction on his face. Clara rushed to his side, her face ashen.
Ethan. Oh my God. Did you see him? He pushed you.
Ethan nodded grimly, his heart pounding against his ribs. It wasn't random. It was a warning. That night, the final blow landed. Slipped under their apartment door was a plain envelope. Inside, no words, just photographs. Photos of them leaving the courthouse. Photos of them at the diner where they met Daniel Cho. Photos taken through their apartment window. Surveillance. And tucked between the photos, a single, chilling message typed on plain paper. Drop the case. Next accident will be fatal. Clara sank onto the sofa, the photos scattering around her, her body trembling uncontrollably.
And please. That's it. We have to stop. This isn't just about the house anymore. They're going to kill us. and the man at the subway these pictures. It's too dangerous. We can't win against them. Please, Ethan. If something happens to you, I can't lose you too.
Ethan picked up one of the photos, his expression hardening into resolve, though fear gnawed at him. He wheeled himself to the window, looking down at the anonymous city lights.
If we stop now, Clara, they win. They get away with everything. They'll keep doing this to other people, people who don't have even the small chance we do. They wouldn't do this unless they were scared. They know we're getting close.
The chilling photos and Ben Carter's battered face were stark warnings. Clara's fear was tangible, but Ethan's jaw was set. They wouldn't do this unless they were scared, he thought again. They know we're getting close. But how close? And what would OmniCorp do next? Cracks in the foundation, unmasking the judge. The threats proved OmniCorp was desperate, but Ethan knew the corporation was just one head of the Hydra. Exposing their lies, their contract fraud, their witness intimidation. It wasn't enough as long as Judge Marcus Harding remained on the bench, pulling the strings, protected by the system he served and subverted. Ethan realized with chilling clarity, to win, to truly achieve justice for Clara, he needed to dismantle the foundation. He needed leverage, irrefutable proof, against the judge himself. His mind raced back to Daniel Cho, the nervous whistleblower. Cho had mentioned others who'd been pushed out or silenced by OmniCorp. A long shot, a coded message sent through an encrypted channel Daniel had provided, led him to Arthur Finch. Finch, OmniCorp's former senior accountant, had been fired abruptly 6 months prior for accounting irregularities, a convenient excuse, Ethan suspected, for knowing too much. They agreed to meet on a secluded bench in Waterfront Park, the gray expanse of the port's Sterling Harbor stretching before them under an overcast sky. Arthur Finch was a man diminished, his shoulders slumped inside a neat but worn suit, his eyes constantly scanning his surroundings. He clutched a worn briefcase like a shield. Arthur Finch, you're the Hayes kid? The one taking on OmniCorp? You're either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. Probably both.
Mr. Finch, thank you for meeting me. Daniel Cho suggested you might have insights. Why were you really fired? Arthur Finch, voice low, strained, insights. I saw the rot from the inside, kid. They fired me because I started asking questions about the Special Projects Fund. Millions moving out, disguised as consulting fees. Huge payments, always right after Judge Harding issued a ruling favorable to OmniCorp. Coincidence? I flagged it. Thorne, he smiled, said I was diligently mistaken, and security escorted me out an hour later. My career, gone. Can you link those payments directly to Harding? Arthur Finch, directly. No, they're too clever for that. It's a labyrinth. Shell companies, layers upon layers. Delaware registrations, Cayman accounts, untraceable, mostly. But the internal project codes for the payments, some carried a designation, Project MH. Marcus Harding. And the timing, it was blatant if you knew where to look. But the real proof? OmniCorp runs 2 sets of books. The official ones for the auditors, and the real ones. Thorne keeps the real ledger locked in a vault in his office. Biometric access, 24/7 monitoring. Untouchable. 2 sets of books, offshore accounts. Project MH. This helps, Mr. Finch. More than you know. Can you provide account numbers? Names of the shell corporations? Anything? Arthur Finch, sighs, opens his briefcase briefly, revealing meticulously organized notes. I made copies. Before they wiped my systems. Shell company names I tracked, suspected routing banks. It's not a smoking gun, kid, just smoke. But maybe you can follow it. Just, be careful. Thorne plays for keeps. They watch everyone.
Finch passed over a slim file, his hands trembling slightly, before quickly gathering his things and hurrying away, melting back into the anonymity of the city. Armed with Finch's dangerous knowledge, Ethan immediately filed a meticulously worded discovery motion, requesting access to OmniCorp's overseas financial records, citing irregularities flagged in their provided domestic accounts. A calculated bluff based on Finch's intel. Days later, Ethan received an unexpected summons. Not from the court, but from the district attorney's office. He found himself in a Spartan office facing Assistant District Attorney Maria Rossi, the respected head of the Public Integrity Unit. She had sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor.
Mr. Hayes. Maria Rossi. Please, sit. Your handling of the OmniCorp case has generated interest. Specifically, your motion regarding offshore accounts and the confirmed evidence tampering. We've had OmniCorp on our radar for a while, whispers of judicial influence, but lacked concrete starting points. Your fight seems to be shaking the tree.
ADA Rossi. I believe OmniCorp's corruption extends to Judge Harding himself. I have information suggesting a pattern of favorable rulings coinciding with suspicious payments routed through offshore shell companies. But the direct link is hidden.
Leaning forward slightly, information? From whom?
A source I cannot reveal, who provided credible details about slush funds and potential shell corporations. My discovery motion is based on trying to legally compel OmniCorp to reveal those connections.
Nodding slowly, assessing him, a difficult path. OmniCorp will stonewall with an army of lawyers. Finch was good, but they buried him professionally. You're taking a massive risk, Mr. Hayes. You know that, right?
I know. But it's the only way to get justice for my sister. And perhaps others OmniCorp has targeted.
Ada Rossi considered him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, she made a decision.
Unofficially, completely off the record, my unit has managed limited surveillance on Judge Harding's personal finances due to unrelated inquiries. It's circumstantial, inadmissible as is, and I absolutely cannot reveal my source if this data appears in your filings. Understood?
Understood. Completely.
Rossi slid a single, unmarked thumb drive across the desk.
Standard financial disclosures, bank statements, credit reports, property deeds. Cross-reference it with the ruling dates and Finch's shell company names. See if a pattern emerges. This conversation never happened. Good luck, Mr. Hayes. You'll need it.
For 2 solid days and nights, Ethan barely slept. Fueled by coffee and adrenaline, he cross-referenced dates, names, account numbers, transaction flows. His small apartment became a war room, walls covered in printouts and interconnected lines. His eyes were bloodshot, his back screamed in protest from hours in the wheelchair, but he pushed on, driven by a cold fury. And then he found it. A sickeningly clear pattern. Days after each major ruling by Harding that favored OmniCorp, dismissing competitors' lawsuits, approving controversial zoning variances, and now, potentially, ruling against Clara, significant sums of money flowed from known OmniCorp subsidiaries into a specific shell company Finch had named, registered in the Cayman Islands. Weeks later, funds from that same shell company were used to purchase high-value assets, luxury condos, vintage cars, registered not in Harding's name, but his wife's. The dates aligned perfectly. It wasn't just smoke anymore. It was a blazing fire.
Whispering, exhausted but triumphant, got you. I finally got you, Harding.
Night after night, Ethan traced the complex web of transactions. Numbers blurred, his eyes burned, but then, there it was. An undeniable pattern. Every favorable ruling for OmniCorp was followed by a ghost deposit, flowing through the Caymans, finally landing as prime real estate in Mrs. Harding's name. He finally had Harding cornered. Now, how to use it without exposing Rossi or Finch, and without getting himself killed first. The driver's confession and open threats. The numbers painted a damning picture. An intricate web of offshore accounts and conveniently timed real estate purchases funded by shadows. Ethan had traced the dirty money connecting OmniCorp to Judge Harding's wife. But numbers on a page, however incriminating, lacked the human element needed to shatter Harding's carefully constructed facade of judicial integrity. Financial data, presented by a 19-year-old law student in a wheelchair, could be dismissed by Harding as circumstantial, misinterpreted, insulting conjecture. Ethan needed a voice, a witness who could place the physical cash, the tangible bribe, in the judge's orbit. He needed someone who had personally bridged the gap between OmniCorp's ledger and Harding's pockets. His investigation, aided by Finch's leads and some deep dives into public records, pointed to one man, George Bell, Judge Harding's driver for nearly 15 years. Bell had a clean employment record but a messy personal life, a recent string of DUIs, whispers of gambling debts. Leverage. Ethan arranged a meeting, choosing a dimly lit, smoky bar near the docks, far from the courthouse's polished corridors. George Bell arrived looking wary, older than his years, nursing a cheap whiskey. George Bell, who are you? What do you want? Someone said you had information about my situation?
Sliding into the booth opposite him, George. We need to talk. About your driving record, 3 DUIs in 2 years looks bad, could mean jail time this round. And about your deliveries. For the judge. George Bell, eyes widening in panic, deliveries. I don't know what you're talking about. I just drive the judge. Don't you?
Ethan slid a small series of photographs across the sticky table. Grainy surveillance shots, but clear enough. Bell handing a thick manila envelope to Maxwell Thorne's executive assistant in the lobby of a luxury hotel. Another, showing Bell placing an identical envelope discreetly into the judge's briefcase in the courthouse parking garage.
These deliveries, George. Made frequently over the past 5 years. Often just before or after Judge Harding issued rulings benefiting OmniCorp. Coincidence? Or were you ferrying cash? Bribes? Because accessory to bribery carries a hefty sentence too. Especially when combined with felony DUI. George Bell, sweating, voice trembling, what do you want from me? Who are you working for? I'm representing my sister against OmniCorp. The case Harding is presiding over. I want the truth. Testify, George. Tell the court what you carried in those envelopes, who you delivered them to, on whose orders. George Bell, testify. Are you crazy? Harding. Thorne. They'll kill me. They'll crush me. Ruin my family. My son just started college. They already have leverage over you, George. Your DUIs. Your debts. Testify, and maybe ADA Rossi's office can offer some leniency regarding your other issues. Stay silent, protect Harding, and you go down for everything when this breaks. And trust me, George, it will break. You can be a witness, or you can be collateral damage. Your choice.
Bell stared at the photos, then at Ethan's implacable face. He drained his whiskey in one gulp, the glass shaking in his hand. Defeat settled over him. George Bell, okay. God help me, okay. I'll testify. What do I have to lose now? Back in court a few days later, the atmosphere was charged. Ethan, armed with the financial data from Rossi and Bell's potential testimony, began his presentation. He displayed charts on the courtroom monitors, stark visuals connecting OmniCorp payments to shell companies, tracing funds to assets held by Harding's wife, the dates aligning suspiciously with key rulings.
This chart demonstrates a clear correlation, Your Honor. Within days of 4 separate rulings significantly benefiting OmniCorp over the past 3 years, substantial deposits were made into the Viridian Holdings account in the Cayman Islands, an entity linked to OmniCorp subsidiaries. Subsequently, funds from Viridian were used to purchase properties now held by your wife, Judge Harding. Is this pattern merely coincidence?
Face contorted with rage, Mr. Hayes. This is outrageous. An insulting, baseless accusation. You are bordering on contempt of court. I will have you arrested. How dare you imply?
I merely present the data, Your Honor. Perhaps a witness can shed light on how OmniCorp funds might have traveled. The defense calls George Bell to the stand.
A gasp went through the courtroom. Evelyn Reed shot to her feet.
Objection. Surprise witness. Improper procedure. Mr. Hayes failed to notify counsel.
This is an urgent witness whose relevance became clear following analysis of recently obtained financial data, Your Honor. Necessary to establish the truth.
ADA Rossi, observing from the back row, subtly nodded towards the bench. Harding, trapped, his face pale and sweating, reluctantly allowed it.
Fine. Proceed. But this is highly irregular.
George Bell walked nervously to the stand. Under Ethan's calm questioning, he recounted his 15 years driving for the judge. Then, his voice trembling, he detailed the envelopes. George Bell, yes, several times a year. Maybe 6, 7 times. Usually after a big OmniCorp ruling came down. The judge would tell me to expect a package. Sometimes I picked it up from Mr. Thorne's assistant at the Hamilton Hotel. Sometimes Ms. Reed herself handed it to me outside her office building. Thick manila envelopes. Heavy. Always cash, Your Honor. He told me never to look inside. But, you feel it. I'd deliver them directly to the judge, usually at his home, late at night. He said it was consulting fees. Confidential bonuses. The courtroom erupted. Harding slammed his gavel repeatedly, his face purple with fury.
Lies. All lies. Perjury. This man is clearly unstable. He's fired. Effective immediately. Bailiff, remove this witness. Arrest him for perjury. This proceeding is.
But his frantic outburst only solidified the impression of guilt. Ethan watched, a grim satisfaction in his eyes. That night, the final warning came. As Ethan worked late in their apartment, reviewing Bell's testimony, the sound of shattering glass echoed from the living room, followed by Clara's terrified scream. Ethan threw himself from his wheelchair, dragging himself across the floor using the strength of his arms. He found Clara confronting a large man in a black ski mask, holding the jagged neck of a broken vase. Marcus Flint, low, menacing voice, last warning. You and the cripple lawyer boy, don't show up in court tomorrow. Drop it, or you both end up like your parents. Understand? Prepare to die. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through Ethan. His heart hammered against his ribs. But looking at the intruder's eyes, visible above the mask, he forced calmness into his voice, fumbling discreetly with the recording app on his phone.
Get out. Now. I know who you are. Marcus Flint. OmniCorp Security Solutions. Your face, your voice, it's all recorded. Sent directly to the cloud. ADA Rossi gets it if anything happens to us.
The intruder, Flint, hesitated for a fraction of a second, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, before turning and scrambling back out the broken window into the night. Clara rushed to Ethan, pulling him into a trembling hug.
Ethan, he could have killed you. You're crazy.
The masked intruder vanished, leaving behind shattered glass and the chilling echo of his threat. Death was now explicitly on the table. Clara was terrified, but Ethan, clutching his phone, the recording potentially captured, the man's description seared into his memory, knew they were on the verge of breaking the case wide open. One final push remained. The final gambit, exposure and arrest. Dawn broke over Port Sterling on the final, decisive day of the trial. The air itself seemed to hold its breath, thick with anticipation and the lingering chill of the previous night's threats. Inside Courtroom 4, every seat was filled long before proceedings began. Reporters lined the walls, notebooks poised, sensing that the simmering scandal was about to boil over. Ethan Hayes, pale and visibly exhausted, dark circles stark beneath his eyes, felt the familiar ache in his back intensify, a physical manifestation of the months of relentless pressure. Yet, as Clara gently positioned his wheelchair beside the defense table, his gaze was steady, intense. In his pocket, the small digital recorder felt both heavy and hopeful, the key, perhaps, to everything. Across the courtroom, Judge Marcus Harding entered, taking his seat on the bench with an unusual air of calm, almost smugness. He even offered Ethan a tight, thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. Clara leaned closer to Ethan, whispering urgently.
Ethan, something's wrong. Look at Harding, he looks confident. I think they're planning something. Be careful.
Ethan gave a slight nod, his eyes narrowing as he watched Evelyn Reed approach the podium. She radiated supreme confidence.
Your Honor, OmniCorp calls a rebuttal witness. Mr. Daniel Cho.
A wave of surprise rippled through the courtroom. Daniel Cho, the whistleblower who had provided the crucial USB drive, walked slowly to the stand. He looked terrified, yes, but also strangely composed, dressed in a neat suit, avoiding Ethan and Clara's eyes completely. After being sworn in, he faced Evelyn Reed.
Mr. Cho, you previously provided information to the defendant and her brother, correct? Information contained on a USB drive?
Voice flat, rehearsed, yes.
Please tell the court the circumstances under which you provided that information.
It was all lies. The documents on that drive. I altered them. Ethan Hayes, he contacted me multiple times. He pressured me. Threatened me, even. Said he knew things about my past, implied he'd expose me unless I helped him fabricate evidence against OmniCorp. He told me exactly what documents to create, what dates to use.
The courtroom erupted. Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, tears instantly welling. Reporters were frantically typing. Judge Harding leaned forward, a look of triumphant vindication spreading across his face.
Lies? Fabricated evidence? Mr. Hayes threatened you?
Yes, Your Honor. I was scared. My mother, she's very ill, I couldn't risk. He forced me. None of it was real.
Clara looked utterly devastated, hope draining from her face. Harding slammed his gavel, though his voice was laced with satisfaction.
Order! This is shocking testimony. It appears this entire defense has been built on deceit and coercion. Mr. Hayes, do you have anything whatsoever to say to these extremely serious allegations? Have you been threatening witnesses and fabricating evidence before this court?
Ethan watched Daniel Cho, seeing the terror behind the rehearsed words, the flicker of shame in his averted gaze. He took a slow breath, his expression unreadable.
Yes, Your Honor. I do have something to say. And something to play. With the court's permission, I would like to present newly acquired audio evidence pertinent to Mr. Cho's testimony and the threats made against witnesses in this case.
Objection. Your Honor, this is outrageous. Evidence must be submitted during discovery. What is this, more theatrics? He's trying to distract from his own misconduct.
This evidence was obtained late last night, Your Honor, directly relating to intimidation tactics employed in this case, making it admissible under procedural rules regarding newly discovered, critical evidence impacting witness testimony. Rule 404(b) allows for evidence of prior bad acts when relevant to motive, intent, or plan, in this case, OmniCorp's plan to obstruct justice.
ADA Maria Rossi stood quietly from her place among the observers.
Your Honor, given the nature of Mr. Cho's reversal and the prior documented instances of witness intimidation and evidence tampering, the people support hearing this recording in the interest of establishing the full truth.
Judge Harding hesitated, his face flushing red again, caught between Reed's objection and the ADA's implied warning. Reluctantly, he nodded.
Very well. Play the recording. But this better be relevant, Mr. Hayes.
Ethan activated his phone, connecting it to the court's audio system. A low hiss filled the room, then the sound of shattering glass, followed by muffled movement and panicked breathing. Then, a low, menacing voice, the voice of Marcus Flint, the intruder. Marcus Flint, voice on recording last warning. You and the cripple lawyer boy, don't show up in court tomorrow. Drop it, or you both end up like your parents. Understand? Prepare to die. Ethan Hayes, voice on recording, get out. Now, I know who you are. Marcus Flint. OmniCorp Security Solutions. Your face, your voice, it's all recorded. Sent directly to the cloud. ADA Rossi gets it if anything happens to us. Marcus Flint. Voice on recording, sound of hesitation, then scrambling. Silence hung heavy in the courtroom. Then, the recording continued, capturing a different conversation, apparently recorded earlier by the same device, forgotten by Flint in his haste. This voice was smooth, cultured, instantly recognizable as OmniCorp CEO Maxwell Thorne, speaking with Evelyn Reed. Maxwell Thorne, voice on recording, make sure Cho flips tomorrow. The pressure on his mother, is it sufficient? We can't have him corroborating that USB drive. Reed, confirm Carter is still keeping quiet post-accident? Good. And the data trail, the offshore accounts Finch mentioned, ensure all digital footprints are erased. Utterly. If that connection gets out, if the kid links the payments to Harding. Evelyn Reed, voice on recording, it's being handled, Mac's top priority. Harding knows what's at stake. He'll hold the line. The Hayes siblings, they'll be crushed tomorrow. Just loose ends now. The recording clicked off. Absolute silence enveloped the courtroom. Every eye was fixed on Judge Harding, whose face had turned a ghastly shade of white. Evelyn Reed looked utterly horrified, her composure finally shattered. Daniel Cho had buried his face in his hands. Harding scrambled, grabbing his gavel, his voice high-pitched with panic.
This is illegal. Manipulated. Inadmissible. This trial is adjourned. Court is.
He half rose, trying to flee the bench, but Ethan's voice cut through the chaos, cold and clear, resonating with righteous fury.
Judge Marcus Harding. Under Title 18, Section 201 of the United States Code, pertaining to bribery of public officials, and Section 1512, regarding tampering with a witness, victim, or informant, I request your immediate arrest. ADA Rossi. Officers. Do your duty.
ADA Rossi nodded sharply. Uniformed court officers, already moving at her signal, stepped forward, blocking Judge Harding's path as he tried to push past them.
Get away from me. This is nonsense. Contempt. I am a judge.
Silence fell, broken only by the sharp, final click of handcuffs fastening around the wrists of Judge Marcus Harding. The embodiment of judicial power, apprehended for corruption in his own courtroom. The impossible had happened. But the shockwaves from this explosion were only beginning to spread. Justice, reckoning, and a new horizon. Silence fell, broken only by the sharp, final click of handcuffs fastening around the wrists of Judge Marcus Harding. The embodiment of judicial power, apprehended for corruption in his own courtroom. The impossible had happened. The shockwaves from that moment rippled outwards, shaking the foundations of Port Sterling's legal and corporate worlds. 6 months passed. The dust from the courtroom explosion settled, revealing a landscape irrevocably changed. The OmniCorp Gate scandal, as the press inevitably dubbed it, had become a national spectacle. ADA Maria Rossi's Public Integrity Unit, armed with the evidence Ethan had unearthed and the confessions that followed Harding's arrest, launched a full-scale investigation. Maxwell Thorne, OmniCorp's untouchable CEO, was indicted, along with Evelyn Reed and several other top executives implicated in the conspiracy, bribery, and obstruction charges. Dozens of other cases previously decided by Judge Harding were under review, revealing a pattern of corruption stretching back years. OmniCorp itself faced crippling federal investigations, shareholder lawsuits, and plummeting stock prices. The empire Thorne had built on ruthlessness and impunity was finally facing a reckoning. For Ethan and Clara Hayes, life began to find a new, tentative rhythm. We find them 6 months later, sitting at a small table outside a quiet cafe overlooking Waterfront Park, the same park where Ethan had met Arthur Finch. The autumn sun felt warm on their faces. Clara looked lighter. The haunted look in her eyes had softened, replaced by a quiet strength. She'd started sketching again, pouring her creativity into new designs, considering offers to consult independently, far from the shadow of corporate giants.
I still can't quite believe it sometimes. Seeing Thorne and Reed on the news, facing actual consequences. 6 months ago, I thought we'd lose everything. The house, maybe even each other.
We came close. Too close. But we didn't break, Clara. That's what matters.
Ethan, too, seemed changed. The constant tension had eased from his shoulders, though the intensity in his eyes remained. News of his unprecedented victory had spread far beyond Port Sterling. Full scholarship offers from prestigious law schools had poured in, along with tentative feelers from public interest law firms, impressed by his tenacity and sharp legal mind. As they sipped their coffee, a young woman hesitantly approached their table. She looked to be in her early 20s, holding a faded activist flyer. Unnamed saved person, excuse me. Are you Ethan and Clara Hayes? I hope you don't mind. I had to thank you.
Thank us. For what? Unnamed saved person, Project Chimera. The OmniCorp surveillance program your trial exposed. The one using your algorithm, Ms. Hayes? My activist group, we were organizing protests against OmniCorp's labor practices. We found out later, through the investigation documents released by the DA, that OmniCorp was using Chimera to track us, predict our movements, identify organizers, using your tech meant for something good, twisted into that. If you hadn't exposed it, hadn't fought back, who knows what they would have done with that power? How many lives they could have ruined? You didn't just win your case. You stopped something truly dangerous. Thank you. Both of you.
The young woman smiled gratefully, tears welling in her eyes, before quietly walking away, leaving Ethan and Clara in thoughtful silence. Clara reached across the table, placing her hand over Ethan's.
She's right, you know. It wasn't just about us or the house or even mom and dad. What you did, it mattered. You stood up to them when no one else could or would. I know the toll it took, the nightmares, the threats, but look what you accomplished. I'm so proud of you, Ethan. More than words can say.
Looking out towards the distant courthouse spire, we accomplished it, Clara. Together. It cost a lot, maybe too much. And seeing Thorne and Harding face justice, it's satisfying, yes. But it doesn't fix everything. They're just symptoms. The system that allowed them to operate like that for so long, that's still here. The loopholes, the ingrained influence of money and power.
So what now? You have all those law school offers.
Yeah. Maybe winning one case isn't enough. Maybe defending isn't enough. Maybe the fight isn't just in the courtroom reacting to the damage they cause. Maybe it's about challenging the system itself. Changing the rules they exploit. I learned a lot about how the system works, and how it breaks. Maybe I can help fix it.
A new sense of purpose seemed to settle over him, transforming the exhaustion into quiet resolve. The evening sun began to dip towards the horizon, painting the port's sterling skyline in hues of orange and gold. A hopeful future, uncertain but possible, stretched before them. Clara smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached her eyes for the first time in years.
Well, whatever you decide to do, I know you'll be brilliant.
A slight, playful smirk returning, thanks, Clara. Oh, and sister. Next time you get offered a life-changing contract from a multi-billion-dollar corporation, let me read the fine print first, okay?
Clara burst into laughter, a clear, bright sound that mingled with the gentle breeze coming off the harbor, the sound of healing and of hope renewed.